you'll see a note now that it's recorded.
Yeah, I would say we can start.
Okay.
Chiara, you have the floor.
So, I would like to welcome and introduce Camilla Campedelli. She is a Roman historian and epigraphist and chief secretary of the International Association of Greek and Latin Epigraphy. After a PhD in Zurich, she took up research and teaching appointments in Zurich, Cologne, Berlin, Verona, Palermo, and the United States. She gave conferences and talks and published widely on many themes, from Roman road system to Roman Spain, from municipal cities administration to Greek and Roman religion and magic. She is now based at the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and Humanities, where she is a research assistant at the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. Today, she will talk to us about ancient inscriptions and digital epigraphy. Now, please, Camilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind presentation, and thank you, Julia, for inviting me tonight to talk about ancient inscriptions and digital epigraphy. In this paper, I'll give you an overview of the epigraphic work from its beginning, focusing on the changes caused by the use of several technical tools. I'll start with a short definition of epigraphy and its significance for the study of the ancient world, and continue describing the epigraphic work before and after the advent of machines. Doing that, I'll concentrate on the technique of collecting documentation, text reproduction, drawings, quizzes, pictures, text restoration, and on the modern edition of epigraphic texts, traditional editions, databases, digital editions. I will conclude with some considerations on the advantages and disadvantages brought by the use of machines to epigraphy. Given my own experience, I'll mainly refer to Roman and particularly Latin epigraphy and to the methods used by the authors of the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, knowing that, at least from a methodological point of view, everything that will be said certainly also applies to Greek epigraphy and other forms of critical editions. Epigraphy and the study of the ancient world. Epigraphy is the discipline aimed at collecting, deciphering, classifying, and interpreting ancient Greek and Roman inscriptions. Inscriptions are of inestimable value as sources for the study of the Greco-Roman life and history in all their aspects. Because the source material is so manifold, epigraphic technique must always be embedded in the relevant branch of classical studies. On the other hand, most classical disciplines are dependent upon the results of epigraphic research because new finds of inscriptions are often the only source for significant additions to our knowledge of antiquity. Some fields of classical studies, such as prosopography or social, economic, administrative, and military history, rely for the most part on epigraphic sources. Sometimes an inscription throws a whole new light on what has been transmitted by literary sources, as it has happened with the find in Spain of the Senatus Consultum de Cneopisone Patre, which offers a contemporary official version of events to be set alongside Tacitus' account of the death of Germanicus and its consequences. Lexicographers, too, see inscriptional evidence on a par with the literary language transmitted in manuscript, so that the production of the Thesaurus Linguae Latinae, the most comprehensive dictionary of the Latin language, involved the contribution of the editors of the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. Outside classical studies, Romance linguistics, to name one example, benefits from the unique documentation of Vulgar Latin provided by inscriptions from the late Antiquity and earlier periods. The epigraphic work before the advent of machines. The science of epigraphy has been developing steadily once the classical inheritance of Western culture began to awake scholarly interest. Epigraphic material became, among other sources, subject of study. The first epigraphic collections, stricto sensu, are attested since the 15th century by famous scholars like Poggio Bracciolini, Ciriaco d'Ancona, and Pirro Ligorio. Early 17th century epigraphic research reached its peak with Jan Gruter's collection Inscriptiones Antiquae totius orbis Romani in Corpus Absolutissimum Redactare. This corpus was designed as a summa of all known inscriptions from the Roman world. It included 12,000 inscriptions and detailed index, which made it the pioneer of the modern epigraphic publications. The index made the mass of information accessible. It listed, e.g., and it recorded all epigraphical evidence. It listed, e.g., all inscriptions containing unusual words. It collected all the references to emperors and consuls, and it recorded all epigraphical evidence on religious, political, and military institutions, as well as laws. The advent of computing machines, as we will see, has made the discovery of recurring references or parallels in epigraphical jargon significantly faster and in some respects more complete. To find parallels is the foundation of any epigraphic research because it allows to locate a phenomenon in different parts of the ancient world and to decipher and integrate fragmentary documents. At some point, Gruter's collection could no longer satisfy the high standards of a modern critical edition, which was what Theodor Mommsen aimed at. In a memorandum of the Royal Prussian Academy of Sciences, today's Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and Humanities, from the year 1847, titled On the Plan and Execution of a Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, Theodor Mommsen distinguished his aims from those of previous editors and set out his own idea of a complete publication of Latin inscriptions. The Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, henceforth CIL, was launched in 1853, and by the First World War, the majority of Latin inscriptions then known had been published. Already in the early decades of the 20th century, the scholars working on the CIL, among whom there are illustrious names such as Hermann Dessau, Otto Hirschfeld, and Eugen Bormann, realized that the edition of inscriptions would be a continuous task for scholars concerned with source materials for classical research. In fact, the CIL still exists today after 168 years, and the new CIL volumes contain thrice as many inscriptions as those included in the first editions. Along with the goal of completeness, Mommsen insisted on the following principle: that the new collection should distinguish itself from the older ones by its critical approach, since that all criticism which does not go back to the original sources is incomplete. A critical edition, therefore, requires a personal inspection of the original monument, in our jargon, autopsy, if this is still possible. Drawings, squeezes, that means impressions in latex or paper, and photographs are used. Moreover, the monument must be precisely measured, and its wider archaeological context, including attention to the local epigraphic environment of the city and province, must be examined. In this way, a thorough documentation of the inscription is brought together, and on this basis, first, a record, and ultimately, the text itself can be established. The CIL archives at today's Berlin seat in Unter den Linden 8 preserve the precious documentation produced in order to critically edit the inscriptions that have been included in the corpus and are at the same time evidence of the working method adopted from the beginnings of this large-scale academic project up to the present day. The CIL archives at 650 boxes like these, ordered according to the geographic system of the CIL volumes, contain the so-called autograph schedae, composed by the first authors, including Theodor Mommsen. A scheda consists of a series of notes that contain the information acquired by the author before, after, and during the autopsy. In the scheda, there are also often excerpts from more ancient manuscripts, drawings, and the correspondence between the scholars who have dealt with the document. Often, annotations that did not appear in the final edition are still preserved in the schedae. These documents are therefore a potentially significant additional source of metadata, and that is why the schedae are regularly consulted before new editions or supplements are published. Another fundamental working tool for the epigraphist is the squeeze. That is, as already mentioned, the reproduction of the text through impression or on latex, or most frequently on paper. This will serve as a complete and reliable basis for restoring and editing text. Sometimes, after returning from an epigraphic field trip, the work at the desk takes an unexpected turn. A define needs to be re-examined. It can be helpful to draw on the head of a photograph in this case. Yet, it is much more beneficial if the epigrapher has squeezes at her disposal. Often, a reading is impossible until the squeeze itself is at hand. While a paper cliché can be read under favorable light conditions at any time, with the sun's rays falling at the angle to show the contours of letters in the desired clarity. A photograph, be it taken with a film or a digital camera, only shows the relief at a given moment in time and can occasionally alter the appearance of the actual object. The squeeze can even be better than the original in those cases where the original is located in a shady or dark place and cannot be moved from there because of its weight. This squeeze is very simple to produce. After having cleaned the stone and having removed any crust, moss, or lichen, a sheet of paper is dipped in water and laid flat and cleanly on the inscribed surface. Beating with a brush allowed the moist paper to penetrate the depression of the letters on the surface and create a negative of the inscription. Once the paper has dried, it can then be removed from the monument. The CIL's collection of squeezes of Latin inscriptions is the world's most comprehensive, with its around 20,000 specimens. They are stored in this room in Berlin. The majority of these are paper and latex squeezes, graphite wrappings, as well as silver foil cliché, drawing on foil, and several plaster casts. If an inscription is now lost, or either wholly or partially destroyed, squeezes are often the only sources of its transmission. Until recently, the only possibility that scholars had to see our schedae or squeezes was to contact the Berlin team to obtain a reproduction or to visit personally our collection, especially when it was necessary to check a high amount of material. This obstacle is today almost completely overcome by the creation of the portal Archivum Corporis Electronicum, which since yesterday is is available online on its restored version, enriched with the presence of schedae and squeezes, and also scanned squeezes scanned in 3D. The previous version included only pictures and bibliography. The purpose of those who study inscriptions is often to edit them in a corpus by reproducing on paper the text engraved on stone, bronze, lead, ceramic, stucco, etc. The first edition of the CIL was published without pictures. Only facsimiles of the epigraphs that were as similar as possible in their layout to the originals were included. Particularly interesting is the case of CIL4 with the Titoli Picti and Scarifati of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Clichés of this type were especially created to reproduce the very particular cursive inscriptions, often accompanied by drawings. The advent and, above all, the commercialization of photography constitute a revolution for epigraphic corpora. Starting from the end of the 1980s, the volumes of the CIL were accompanied by pictures, and the inscriptions were transcribed using a system of diacritical signs developed from the so-called Leiden system, which has now become standard, the Krummerei-Pancera system. The text is presented with all gaps restored and some errors corrected as far as this is possible. The abbreviations are expanded. The particularities of the letters are indicated with appropriate signs, ligatures, marks for word division, apices, and special signs, as well as erasures and rewriting, correction and addition, omissions, etc. The period between the end of the 90s and the beginning of the new millennium represents for epigraphy a technical term. In 1997, the Association Internationale d'Epigraphie Grecque et Latine, the international organization that promotes the study of inscriptions of the classical words, assigned to a commission of epigraphists and informatics the job of collecting the most important initiatives of digitation of epigraphic sources and unifying these projects according to common scientific principles. The aim was to digitize all Latin and Greek inscriptions and to create a system for a steady update following these principles. The inscriptions should be presented according to their best existing editions and, when possible, including all corrections after a check of the original monument. The number of additional important data had also to be given. Discovery location, ancient region, current region, ancient and modern city, bibliography, record number, last update, pictures. The first name of the database was Titoli Antiqui Collecti. Now it's called AIEGL, Electronic Archives of Greek and Latin Epigraphy. AIEGL became soon and still is an association of databases with the purpose of collecting all published Greek and Latin inscriptions up to the 7th century AD. The Epigraphic Database Roma, EDR, the Epigraphic Database Bari, EDB, the Epigraphic Database Heidelberg, ADH, Hispania Epigraphica Online. EDR aims to collect the whole epigraphy of Rome and of the Italian peninsula, including Sardinia and Sicily, with the exception of Christian inscriptions under EDB jurisdiction. The epigraphic database Heidelberg contains the text of Latin and bilingual, it has Latin, Greek inscriptions of the Roman provinces, with the exceptions of the Iberian Peninsula, whose inscriptions are collected by the database Hispania Epigraphica Online. At the moment, the most complete database of Latin inscriptions is a spin-off of AIEGL, the Epigraphic Datenbank Klaus Slavi. It records almost all Latin inscriptions. The texts are presented without abbreviations and completed where possible. The presentation of the text is kept as simple as possible. The existence of these databases, especially the Manfred Klaus database, has incredibly speeded up some steps of the epigraphic research. The rapid discovery of references allows scholars to integrate inscriptions and to verify the existence of a particular phenomenon from any region of the empire in a very short time. Before the advent of databases, to find parallels meant to browse the approximately 90 volumes of the CIL and or their indices for the inscriptions published up to the early 1900s. Subsequent discoveries were to be tracked down in the Année Epigraphique and relevant journals. This procedure slowed down the research process remarkably. Nevertheless, the search of parallels can never be separated from the control of the original publication, the editio princeps. This step is unfortunately very often missed. The limit of many databases, in fact, including the most complete ones, is that they contain numerous errors due to the speed with which the data are entered. As it has already been said, the databases are not an edition because, with very few exceptions, they ignore the still valid teaching of Theodor Mommsen, according to which an autoptic examination of the inscription is necessary in order to edit it. It is not enough to report the best of the previous reading, and in some cases, any corrections. In recent years, interesting projects of digital editions of inscriptions have been undertaken. The very first one is the digital edition of the inscriptions from Aphrodisias, a city in southwest Turkey, the Inscriptions of Aphrodisias projects. More recent are, e.g., Sicily, the digital edition of inscriptions from Sicily, and the project Keltische Göttername in den Inschriften der römischen Provinz Germania Inferior. It is clear that there is a substantial difference between a database and an electronic edition. While the database contains a vast number of texts, the electronic editions cover a limited geographic area or a specific topic, while certainly guaranteeing a higher quality of readings produced by the author by means of autopsy. The epigraphic texts are digitized through the tools provided by the international collaborative effort EpiDoc. EpiDoc is a subset of the text encoding initiatives standard for the representation of text in digital form and adopts the extensible markup language XML, a technical standard promulgated by the World Wide Web Consortium. It records not only the transcription and editorial comments of the texts themselves, but also the history, materiality, and metadata of the objects on which the texts are inscribed. Thanks to the many trainings organized in the last 10 years, the number of epigraphists using EpiDoc has been increasing, so that we shall hope to have much more digital edition in the next future. This is, in my opinion, also the future of the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, which should have a print and a digital edition. In any case, it is a big step forward that the last 3 published volumes of the CIL are now available as an e-book by the publisher De Gruyter. Film or digital pictures, databases, and digital editions are of course not the only technologies which in the last decades changed the study of ancient inscriptions. A revolution for the reading of very difficult or very damaged documentation is the use of the reflectance transformation imaging, RTI. RTI is a computational photographic method that captures both shape and color of a surface and prompts the interactive relighting of the object from different directions. RTI can also mathematically enhance the features of shape and color of the object. The enhancing functions of RTI reveal information about the surface that is not available under human visual examination of the physical object. Rapidly expanding is the presentation of 3D squeezes like those from of the collection of the Museo Archeologico Nacional in Madrid. This kind of documentation is essential for the study of the monuments, which in turn is always closely related to the inscribed text and their interpretation. The most amazing project of the last decade, based on the largest existing database of Greek inscriptions, the Humanities Institute Searchable Greek Inscriptions, is, in my opinion, the fully automated deep learning model called PIZIA, which aids the task of ancient text restoration. The main job of an epigraphist is to restore the missing part of inscriptions, usually found incomplete or damaged. To do this, as already seen, today's epigraphists have to find parallels. PIZIA could in the future help fulfill this task faster and maybe with greater precision, when the model will be improved by adding more inscriptions and even be extended to Latin epigraphy. I would like to conclude by sharing with you some considerations on the meaning of new technologies applied to epigraphy. The possibility to publish pictures in the corpora was the first real great revolution. the reader was given the opportunity to control the text on the original monument. Certainly, nowadays, the inspection of the picture in a print edition cannot replace the autopsy of the monument and or of the squeeze. However, it is not excluded that in the near future, the diffusion of the technique of reproducing images through the RTI model or three-dimensional squeezes published in digital editions will actually replace the direct control of the inscription. The advent of databases has certainly speeded up the search for epigraphic parallels and bibliography, but in many cases, it has reduced the quality of the research and the learning process related with the inspection of the volumes of the CIL and their indices. The presence of numerous errors in the databases due to the speed with which the texts are often uploaded can sometimes frustrate the search for parallels. I believe that the future of epigraphy lies in the scholar's commitment to create interlinked electronic editions that respect the standards of quality and completeness established in 1853 by Theodor Mommsen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this intriguing and very exhaustive paper and talk. So now it's time to open the floor to discussion. I can see many, I don't know if they are raised hands or perhaps it's easier if you write something in the chat if you want to ask a question, if you have a question for Camilla. Okay, Serafina Cuomo, please.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot. I want to ask a question with my teaching hat on. I teach in the UK. I don't know if the situation is different in other countries in Europe, but none of my students, even those who do classics, really study epigraphy. At the same time, I think it's important for them to be exposed to epigraphy, not just for the purposes of ancient history, but also, you know, to access different styles, I guess, of Greek and Latin. So I was wondering to what extent teaching is a consideration in the move of epigraphy to a more digital version, because I can see the downside of the databases, and the Clausus Labi is not something I would give to an undergraduate to kind of search, but it certainly has made epigraphy inscriptions more accessible to undergraduates. And when I say teaching, I also see it as an issue of, if you like, the next generation. We certainly need to train more epigraphists, but it has to start somewhere. So I guess, you know, it's just a question about to what extent teaching is a consideration.
You mean if I teach digital epigraphy or if I teach traditional epigraphy, or sorry?
No, I mean when new digital epigraphy projects are set up, are they mostly addressed to researchers, or are they interested in developing teaching resources? So
yes, there is. For example, when I teach Latin epigraphy at the Humboldt University in Berlin, I sometimes use databases to teach. For example, I let the students create some records that we integrate in the database. I did it last year with my students using inscriptions from my city in Italy, Verona. Yes. And are you there, John? John Budell is not there. Because there is a project really to teach digital epigraphy, to teach at the same time the opportunity, they give you the opportunity to learn epigraphy and to make a database, for example, which is, in my opinion, very, very difficult because, for example, I have in one semester only 24 hours to teach, and you have to teach what is epigraphy, you have to teach how to read and how to understand and interpret an inscription. And if you also have to teach how to create with Epidoc a record for a database is really, really difficult. So we should have more time for epigraphy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any question? Ah, okay. Costantino.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. Yeah, I have a couple of questions, to be honest. But first, it's a more general question when it comes to the accessibility and the teaching in general. So, following the question of Serafina Cuomo, I wanted to ask you if you think that from the very beginning we could put a student, undergraduate or graduate, directly in the non-analogical epigraphy. I mean, I was wondering if someone who doesn't know how a squeeze works or how to read an inscription from a squeeze, if the RTI, which to be honest, I didn't know about this, and I'm very grateful that you talked about this. If he or she would be in the position to interpret this or to work with this inscription. I mean, I think that it is very, very important, not only when it comes to the history of epigraphy, but also to the methodology of this discipline, to know how to use the very generic or the very maybe very old methods, which the last 200 years at least are not overcome.
Of course not. Yeah. Yes, of course. I normally teach classical epigraphy. So I normally go to the museum with the students and they learn to read inscriptions from the reality, and they learn to do squeezes and they learn to solve the abbreviations. Of course, this is the first step. We are not so far that we cannot do that, because RTI, for example, is a very, very important and important thing, but we don't have all inscriptions documented with RTI now. So we have to learn at first to work with the traditional methods and slowly learn how we can do in the future.
Yeah.
What is your
Yeah. You answered my question. And if I can ask another one.
Yes, of course. I think yes. Yeah.
Thanks. So I was wondering, I want to hear also your opinion when it comes to the databases again and the digital publications. I would see there only a partial, I mean, I think that through these, the goals of epigraphy can be served only partially. So, but there is a very, very important point there, I think, and it is this goal of completeness you spoke of at the beginning. So I think it's a bit too much to ask from a database or a or online publication to give us the best photos or the best die beste Lesung and so on. But at least when it comes to databases, we can ask this goal of completeness, which is the corpus. I mean, it is very, very difficult when it comes to traditional publications to keep this up. So every year or every 2 years or every 3. But maybe we could use these digital editions or the databases only for this. So as index or as catalogs for all the found inscriptions. And when it comes to this, I wanted to ask you about the editio princeps. So if someone could skip, I mean, if someone could skip the editio princeps and just announce, let's say, the finding of inscription in the field via these databases. So I mean, not via editing these, or but at least something like summary of the inscription or something which could help scholars having to have a more general view on the last findings.
Okay, if I understood, you are right, and I agree with you that we should distinguish between digital epigraphy. No, sorry, we should distinguish between databases and edition. So, but I think that a digital edition could be precise like a print edition. The goal of a database is another one. The goal of the database is the completeness. You're right, but we can in the future, I think, have both. If you work together to publish in digital editions all the known inscriptions. The database is something else, is something really, really necessary for us. But it's not the same. I think we should distinguish, but I really think that we can do a lot of things with digital publications. This is your first question. The second one was the necessity to go back to edition princeps. What I wanted to say is that, for example, I often see that people go to Manfred Klaus database and copy the inscription and paste it. That's not right, because these databases are this database is full of errors, and you have to go back to the CIL if this inscription is in the CIL, or if you have the first edition, you have to go back, because you have to be sure that you are using the right text and not a text with errors.
Okay, so
Very much.
Yeah,
Rebecca now.
Rebecca, hello.
Ciao.
Ciao,
Hello, everyone.
Rebecca, hello.
Very nice to see you. Thank you so much for your talk, Camilla. And thank you all for publicizing this talk, because it was truly wonderful to be sitting here 6 hours behind you and being part of the conversation. I'm so happy about it. So thank you. I first off wanted to say, wow, Camilla, those squeezes that are in Berlin about the handwritten inscriptions from Pompeii, I had no idea they existed, and they're fascinating.
Yeah.
That's what a wonderful, yeah, what a wonderful idea back then. And I hope that those will those eventually come into the electronic archivum, do you think?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, that's okay.
Yes, because it's really difficult. They are we need for that dry D scan.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's really difficult to publish it in, yeah.
I'm still just thrilled to know they exist.
But if you need something, you can ask me, you know, and I send you pictures, or you can come to Berlin.
Thank you.
Maybe in the next future.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So another couple things. The real, there is a difficulty with the Klaus Slaby in that there's no pointing to which reading is being chosen. And I think in addition to what you pointed out, and we all know, Camilla, about it's fast, but the accuracy is lacking. And so the epigraphic database Roma and Heidelberg at least are pointing to which reading, and that is a step forward. And so I think that those are, well, those give you that information that is really helpful. I wanted to say I'm just so happy to see these new steps that Cil is taking, and I'm also very happy for the institutional support that the Corpus still has, because I think that's most important. And as we move into the digital realm, we're still learning, and we're seeing which projects survive and which eventually falter. And that's another issue of the digital realm that is difficult, is that once a book is published, it exists, and the server won't fail at some point, or someone, you know, won't take it down. You can always have these wonderful books in your libraries. And so even though I am so happy with the ebook of Cil Quattro, I am ordering for my library both the print publication and the ebook, because I think they're both very important. When we heard the news a couple of years ago that the epigraphic database Heidelberg was not had kind of limited years of support left, I was very sad, because I thought that was such a productive project that kept growing in usefulness, and to have that project kind of stop growing was just one of our difficult growing pains in learning how to create digital scholarship and sustain it. So I'm just very happy that the Corpus is continuing to move forward and continuing to exist. So.
Yes, it's sure we have to innovate us. We have to I think we still need a print edition, but we also need to go forward and to have a digital edition, which is not a very simple task, I've heard, but there is we want it, so we are looking for the possibility to do that. But what I think is that we need to collaborate with each other all together, and going forward with databases, it is very important, but also thinking on digital editions. Yes.
So there is perhaps a question from Thea Sonship.
Yeah, no, I was just putting, grazie mille, thank you Camilla so much for your talk. I just, apropos of digital editions, wanted to just make the sort of off the hand comment of, during the pandemic, we have realized how library access is of paramount importance, and those nice print editions are just tantalizingly behind the closed doors. I personally have not been able to set foot in an academic library since December 2019. So it's those digital editions, digital publications, open access, and therefore obviously the sustainability of digital projects, especially corpora, which kind of is very present in my mind at the moment, at least.
I have yes, I have a little bit time. Thea, are you thinking about of Pizia for Latin inscriptions, or?
So a project, a paper by
maybe we should say that Thea is the the creator of Pizia. Yes,
thank you. So a paper came out by Patrick Burns. I recognize as the author, for a Latin BERT, which is a very big, very powerful language model for the restoration of Latin inscriptions. So I don't know whether this came out sometime mid last year, and I don't know whether they have been working towards creating perhaps an interface to make this model publicly usable. At the moment, PIFIA has been put on hold. I'm working on something else, but the adjustment of, for instance, the PIFIA project to Latin is obviously low-hanging fruit, and also Latin digital databases and corpora have so much more information, like that there's so much diversity there. Just looking at the resources available on AIEGL is really exciting, because there you actually have metadata, which is a privilege that on PHI is unfortunately lacking. And this also opens all kinds of questions regarding, what do you do with Klaus Labi? What about the edition of reference? What about differences in inscriptions, etc.? So in inscription editions. So working on Latin is exciting, and stay tuned.
Okay.
But do read the Patrick Burns paper. It's I'll find it now and send you the link.
Thank you.
So, any question again?
Yeah, I just have a remark.
Yeah.
A brief remark. Thank you so much, Camilla, for the lecture. I just wanted to go back one sec to the point about printed edition and digital editions. I personally think that is absolutely vital that in the near future we will have as much as possible editions available online, precisely for all the points that you have discussed with us today. But thinking on my experience, I don't know, sometimes when you do work on an edition, you have to think so profoundly about the Greek that it is it can be very exhausting, or at least it has been my experience. And I'm very grateful that I obviously can consult editions in print, just, just because of the way I find it more relaxing, and I can concentrate much better on the Greek. But this might be just
because we are,
but if I have to think how I have to solve this problem in the text and emendate, then I cannot watch hours a screen. And if I need to consult different editions in order to get help, how it could be the possible way to emendate the text, I personally cannot do hours on a screen. Just because I can't focus anymore on the Greek.
Me neither, of course.
But
I think it depends on the generation in which we grew up. So I think younger are always working with the screen. This is the first thing. And the second is, I think we need both print edition and digital edition. Of course, in a digital edition, you can publish things like RTI image or a 3D squeeze. You cannot do that with a print edition, but I still think we need both. I couldn't live without my wall full of CIL volumes, of course. Yes, I think we need both.
Yeah, I completely agree with Rebecca's approach on this, if I may, of just getting both for just sort of differences between access and accessibility. Both are preferable for different reasons, but the digital does enable us to develop new ways of doing ancient history and epigraphy more specifically, which would otherwise be unable, like for instance, for text restoration, we rely on mnemonic parallels. Oh, of course, this formula rings a bell. I've seen it 1,000 times somewhere else. Or you do a basic string search on PHI, or you consult a load of volumes, but having the at your fingertips what a machine can do in a second over all of the texts ever written in Greek, wherever and whenever, is something which I think should not be underestimated and could give new insights, hopefully. But the print edition is the key. I totally agree with all of you on this.
So, any question? Or I think it's time to finish. Julia, you have something to say?
Yeah, thank you very much for a wonderful lecture, and thank you for being with us. As I mentioned before, Serafina's Cuomo lecture will take place on the 15th of March. But we will send off emails to remind and the link. Well, then I wish you all a very nice and relaxing weekend. And we stay tuned. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Aspetta un attimo.
Camilla, grazie. Ah sì, non c'è più il recording. Grazie mille, davvero. Mi è piaciuta tanto la lezione, poi è stata molto divertente. Sì, ho imparato anch'io.
Sì, ho cercato di fare una cosa che